rental crisis, which only appears to be getting worse as the Albanese government continues to bring in record numbers of migrants. New analysis from PropTrack has found the number of new rental listings fell 5.7% in the year to September. As a result of the supply crunch, the national median weekly rent for advertised properties at the end of September was $550 a week. Now, that's up 14.6% compared with this time last year. Joining me to discuss this is Chief Economist of Macro Business, Leith Van Onselen. Leith, thank you so much for your time. Rental listings are down, rents are way up, and Leith, it's not hard to see why when we're bringing in such an enormous number of people. 715,000 Labor are planning to bring in the past financial year and this one.
Yeah, and actually those numbers, Rita, are running well beyond that. The latest monthly visa data from the Department of Home Affairs is an absolute shocker. And it showed that the number of temporary visa holders, that's excluding visitors, in Australia actually ballooned by 600,000 people in the year to September. And That was driven by, so there's basically 2.3 million temporary visa holders in Australia. That's if you exclude holiday makers right now, which means that basically 1 in 11 people in the country right now are on a temporary visa. And this has been driven by, obviously international students, which went up by 300,000. Temporary graduate visas went up by about 100,000 and employment visas went up by about 200,000. So the numbers are off the charts, and this has been obviously reflected in the rental market. We've got rental vacancy rates at all-time low levels. We've got double-digit rental growth across the capital cities. Record low rental listings. And unfortunately, the situation is going to get worse, not just because obviously the government's ramping immigration to levels we've never seen before, but also because housing construction is actually collapsing at the same time. So only 170,000 net homes were supplied last financial year, 2022-2023. And that's against a population increase of 626,000. And pretty much the housing supply last year was already 70,000 below the 1.2 million homes target, which requires 240,000 people a year. So we're way beyond, way below that. And the problem is all the forward-looking indicators, when you look at new home sales, dwelling approvals or loans for, housing construction, are all around decade lows. So we've got this unbelievable imbalance between demand through immigration and supply. And the rental crisis is just going to keep getting worse unless the Albanese government cuts immigration. It's as simple as that.
Well, they don't look like they're going to do that because they're hooked on any sort of economic activity that might bring. And as far as landlords, investors go, on top of all the interest rate hikes, they've got other issues. Your mum and dad property investors are dealing with state governments that are also hooked on property taxes. The situation's particularly grim in Victoria with land tax rates skyrocketing, and where 1 in 4 Melbourne landlords sold their home last year, sold their investment last year. So how much is that a factor in scaring off potential property investors? They look at the renters' rights, the changes to the legislations, the land tax, and, it might be a lot easier to put your money in the share market.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as much of a problem in the established market, because if an investor sells, they're going to sell obviously to a first home buyer or another investor, for example. So you don't actually get a reduction in supply. It's just basically a transfer from investor to a first home buyer. But the big problem is obviously if investors abandon the new home market, and that's obviously creating new supply. So if they abandon that because of all these changes, that's just going to smash the supply side even more, which has already been smashed, obviously, by record numbers of builder failures. We've got, sky-high materials costs, and also, obviously, interest rates are at high levels and probably likely to go higher from here. So the supply side of the housing market is completely stuffed. And, this is occurring at the same time as, obviously, there's a record population growth. So it's an absolutely diabolical situation that the housing market and renters are facing.
Absolutely stuffed seems to be a very apt summary indeed. In fact, Simon Presley, who's one of Australia's most respected buyers advocates, he announced recently that his firm would no longer recommend any Victorian property to investors. I mean, that's how grim things are in this state. Hopefully the other states don't follow. Big news also leaked today with Qantas. The national carrier claims that the ACCC's case against it is ignoring the reality of the aviation industry, as airlines can't guarantee specific flight times. Qantas says that customers on cancelled flights were offered an alternative flight or refund, meaning there was no fee for no service, as the ACCC claims. Leith, this comes as several US mega funds declare they plan to deliver a strike against the Richard Goyder-led board and vote down several directors, including former advertising boss Todd Sampson. Goodness me, Leith, Alan Joyce may have left the building, but the drama continues.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, personally, I think Qantas needs an absolute clean out. Their behaviour pretty much since the pandemic and recently has been pretty poor. I know personal friends who've basically had their flights cancelled at the last minute. It's completely stuffed their holidays, and it's not an isolated example. These sorts of things happen across the board. Obviously, we've had all the travel credit dramas and everything else. And then, of course, obviously, its involvement in The Voice was a bit ridiculous as well. So, look, I think the whole airline does need a clean out, and I think that's a good thing. And also, I think the whole aviation industry in general needs more competition. I mean, we should be opening up flight routes, etc. Let them compete. Don't give them this sort of sheltered workshop, protection racket that's going on. So, I'm all for it. Clean them out. Take out the trash.
Leith Van Alstel, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Cheers, anytime.